if there were any questions about the identity of the Green Bay Packers offense, who they wanted to be, this draft class, especially at the top, answered those questions.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow me on Blue Sky. Wherever you access Blue Sky. Follow the podcast on social media, wherever you find social media. I had someone say, hey, pump Blue Sky at the top of the podcast. And then you'll find Locked On Packers wherever you find podcasts. Locked On Packers is the #1 Packers podcast and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. When the Packers were running the ball a lot last year, there was an outcry is probably overselling what it was. But there was a community of Packer fans saying, look, this is a team identity now with Matt LaFleur. This is who he's always wanted to be. And then there were a group of fans, Vikings fans, Bears fans, Lions fans, mostly, saying, look, see, Matt LaFleur doesn't trust Jordan Love. You look at the run numbers over expectation, and this was one of the most run-heavy teams in the league. Now, 2 weeks of Malik Willis and then 2 more halves of Malik Willis skew those numbers, to be sure. But even when Jordan Love was out there, they leaned on that running game quite a bit. What the draft has shown us, and we talked on draft night, Friday night, about the new identity that this team has and the aims of, all right, you need playmakers, you need vertical speed, and then you need an offensive line that can wall off, that can create running lanes, that can punish too high safety looks, and a passing game that can punish single high safety looks when you come down and stop the run. But you want to be able to run the ball well enough to make teams want to play single high, and then you punish those teams you want to throw it well enough to make teams want to play too high, and then you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. What this draft showed us, though, is that one of the reasons, at least, that the Packers didn't throw it more often is that they didn't have the horses. That it became clear they just don't have the receivers that they were hoping that they had, that the growth of this group stagnated last year. And I want to be clear. I don't think that means that this group is done growing. I don't think this is maxed out for Dontavian Wicks. I don't think this is maxed out for Jaden Reed or even Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. But what this draft is telling us is the Packers believe they need to not just backfill Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, who are likely out the door. And Romeo Doubs, maybe as soon as this offseason. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. But they felt like they needed to add legitimate, high-end, athletic, dynamic playmakers to this offense to maximize it. And the injury to Jordan Love was a huge piece of that. They weren't able to do some of the things that traditionally they wanted to do. And Jordan says he was fine, and Matt LaFleur says he was fine. But the combination of the way we saw this offense run with the offseason tells us it was not fine. That they were not fine playing the way that they were. Now, in those games where they just come out and hammer Josh Jacobs and they set the tone and they come out to an early lead, yeah, I think that they like doing that. Like, if you can do that, great. But you're not going to be able to do it every week. And against the best teams, you have to be able to counterpunch. And that's what this was about. This was about having an answer for everything a defense is going to throw at you. Oh, you want to play a bunch of man coverage? All right, here's a guy who runs 4-2. Oh, you tackle really well? Okay, How about a 6'3", 222-pound guy who 96th percentile speed score, who's an absolute hammer, but also can take it the distance? Just throw in that chaos agent. Oh, we've got some specials for you. All that cool stuff, the push passes to Jaden Reed, the end arounds, the little tunnel screens. Now you've got a real guy that can do that in addition to Jaden Reed. Not that Jaden Reed's not a real guy, but now you have someone else. You don't just have to funnel those touches to Jaden Reed. They needed to diversify this offense to make sure that a team can't just say, well, we're going to play man coverage, and it doesn't matter how good our corners are. We don't think your guys are good enough to beat it. Well, maybe that's true. But if you can just create a manufactured touch for Jaden Reed, or you can just create a manufactured touch for Savion Williams, or you can create a manufactured touch for Josh Jacobs or Tucker Kraft, that makes it a little bit easier. Or if you just create a little bit of space for Matthew Golden. The Packers needed more guys who provided answers for them. They did not have enough answers last year, and that is with a top 5 offense by EPA per play, by DVOA. They were still a really good offense, but they weren't matchup proof. They set about matchup proofing this offense. That's what Matthew Golden is. Now, Matthew Golden is also essentially a 1-for-1 Christian Watson replacement, that vertical Z receiver. You still don't have that X backside, just go make a play guy. Maybe he's on the roster. Maybe that is Dontavian Wicks. Maybe you're going to use Tucker Kraft or Luke Musgrave out there a little bit more. Louis DiBiase from Locked On Eagles speculated that, hey, maybe Luke Musgrave is a trade target for some teams, including the Eagles. If they're going to move on from Dallas Goedert, maybe someone like Luke Musgrave is a worthy swing. Maybe Green Bay would consider something like that. I think they'd like to keep Luke Musgrave for now. But maybe something by midseason, Savion Williams is ahead of development and Tucker Kraft takes that next step and Matthew Golden is who they want him to be as a first-round receiver. Maybe you have that opportunity. Hey, get something interesting for Luke Musgrave if you could. Just something to think about, something to tuck in your back pocket and squirrel away for a rainy day. The idea, though, that they wanted to be a run-first team, or they wanted to protect Jordan Love from himself. This draft, especially at the top, to me tells us the opposite is true. That they believe Jordan Love was not the problem, that it was everybody else. That it was the offensive line, that it was the playmakers. Not Josh Jacobs, because the running game was really good. They bring back Emmanuel Wilson. They bring back Bo Melton on exclusive right free agent deals. Those are no-brainer deals. I think the Packers want to sling the rock. They want to be able to do that if they need to, but they also want to be able to have options. They want to have the most flexible offense that they can have. So, it's cute. Get your dunks in. I know the NFC North fans are going, well, you paid that mid quarterback, and it's like, okay. I mean, all the numbers say that he's a top 10 quarterback, and I've yet to hear a compelling argument as to why those numbers are fake. And if anything, the Packers just showed us that they don't think his supporting cast is holding him up, that they don't think, if they thought Matt LaFleur could just do it, they would have allocated resources that way. We know they love to pick defensive players early. They didn't do that. They felt like they needed to upgrade this aerial attack. Yes, Anthony Belton in the second round, but they're going to need a starting guard sooner than later. They're going to need a backup left tackle sooner than later, like in a year. Using premium draft capital on that is very much in keeping with the way that the Packers manage these rosters. I'm telling you, they will. If Jordan Love is healthy, they will throw it way more this year, or at least they want to. That's the plan. Now, defensively is really interesting. Where do we cash out with the Packers defensively? What do they want to be? Who do they want to be? What do they feel good about? Well, if you're a Locked On Packers listener, I think you were ready for what we saw. We'll talk about that next. The NBA playoffs pushing forward, FanDuel giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Now that the Bucks are out of the action in one of the most embarrassing playoff collapses, well, of the last year at least, I suppose, for the Bucks. They've had a number of them over the last few years. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. FanDuel makes betting easy. Whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props or bet your sides or whatever you want to do. Plus, when the game tips off, you can combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. As we got closer to the draft, I insisted that this Packers team was going to handle the interior of this defensive line on day 3. And I thought that could have been as soon as the 4th round. If you could get someone like CJ West, he was off the board when they had a chance to pick. They picked Barron Sorrell, who was a really nice player who I think is going to fit in for Green Bay. We'll get to him in a second. But this was always the way that made the most sense. When you look at the allocation of resources to Kenny Clark, they're paying a lot of money for him, former first-round pick. Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, they like this group of interior players. And Brian Gutekunst told us, like, how many times do I have to tell you, Brian Gutekunst is going to tell you what he's going to do. He told us and everybody who would listen, they believe in Devontae Wyatt as a long-term piece, or at least as long a term as you can be in the NFL. He's a medium-term piece. He's a new contract kind of player, at the very least a 5th-year option kind of player. 2 more years on the roster. That's medium-term in the NFL and in pro sports. That means he's playing. That if you're willing to give him the 5th-year option, $15 million, if you're willing to give him a second contract, then he is an important player on your team moving forward. And even, look, I said it doesn't make sense for the Packers to move on from Kenny Clark next offseason. It makes sense for them to push more money out. And if they're going to move on from him in 2 off seasons. That's when you bring in Warren Brinson. You have the undrafted free agent that you bring in. You've essentially taken the entirety of the interior defensive line from Georgia last year and ported it over to Green Bay. But we're talking about a 6th-round pick and an undrafted free agent. That was the way this should be handled if all you needed was a backup nose tackle. It's why I backed off Derek Harmon as a 1st-round pick. I did think in the 2nd round, TJ Sanders, Tyreek Williams, those were potential options for them. Both of those guys were off the board by the time the Packers picked. So even if they had wanted to, that was not in play for them. Now, the edge piece of this is interesting. It seemed like they wanted to take an edge player if one of their guys were there. It's clear one of their guys was not there. They had the opportunity twice to take Landon Jackson, and they passed. A bunch of guys went off the board before they had a chance to pick in the 1st round. Guys like Shamar Stewart, guys like Mykel Williams, who I thought that they would draft. I never thought they would be a James Pierce Jr. team. I never thought they would be a Mike Green team. I thought there was a chance on Donovan Ezeraku. Clearly, they just like Matthew Golden better. But I think even clearer is they didn't want to allocate resources there unless someone that they really, really liked happened to be there. And I said in the pre-draft that the one position that can change this offense the most by the end, I said was receiver, one receiver. The second was one big pass rusher. Well, they did not find themselves, at least according to them, in a position to find that one pass rusher. But they're also paying Rashawn Gary $100 million. They also have Lucas Van Ness, who Brian Gutekunst has told anyone who will listen that they believe in. and that they expect big things from. And then if you have your two starting pass rushers, then what you're doing is backfilling, and that's what Colin Oliver is, and that's what Barron Sorrell is. They are Kingsley Enagbare replacements. They are Brenton Cox insurance. They are depth pieces for you. They feel good about this room. And it underscores, it echoes what they did to start the offseason, and that is move on from Jason Rebrovich, which was their way of saying, we believe in the guys in this room. We believe the roster is good enough, that the coaching staff is the problem, or at least one particular coach. And if you change that out and you add some depth, you add on the margins, you add a different type of player with Colin Oliver, that you have the chance to meaningfully improve this team that way. That makes sense. And that doesn't mean that they wouldn't have the opportunity presented itself in the first round. If Michael Williams had been there at 23, I still think there's a pretty good chance they take him. I really do. Because those kinds of players are rare. I think they would have taken, if one of those defensive tackles, if Derek Harmon were there at 23, I think they would have strongly considered it. But I understand the team saying, the player we think impacts this team the most. What do we talk about every pre-draft process? The player who maximally improves your team over the life of his rookie contract. To me, that was a premier receiver talent. They believe they got one. What I believe is immaterial. I don't think Matthew Golden is that kind of talent. But do I think Matthew Golden on this Packers team is better than Matthew Golden on some other teams? Yeah, I do. Do I think he could have the kind of impact on the Packers offense that, say, Jameson Williams had on the Lions? Potentially. I don't think he's as good a player as Jameson Williams was. I hope he's not as big a knucklehead as Jameson Williams was and is. Don't get suspended for gambling. But that is what they're looking at. That is what they see. That is the vision. Hey, add this vertical stretch player. And then you can have, I've said it for 2 years, I don't see why Jaden Reed can't do a lot of the stuff that the Lions have Amon-Ra St. Brown do. I mean, I think Jaden Reed is physically a more gifted player. They want to use him as a vertical player, but I think he can do some of the stuff underneath, choice routes, working open underneath. Now, St. Brown is a little bit thicker, uses his body better as a catcher. He's a much better hands. But part of the problem for Jaden Reed is like he's getting these vertical touches, and those are just harder catches to make. Those are harder connections to make. So back to the defensive part of this, though. They had opportunities early. What they're telling us is their team that they have, which is what Brian Gutekunst told us, like he said, Brian Gutekunst said, he was asked point blank, do you have to add to this room? And he said, no. We are good with the guys we have. And look, I think they would have taken a player had one been available that they loved. But he proved he was not lying. He proved, look, we like this group, at least the starting group. You added some depth because you should always add depth, especially with pass rushers. And I thought Barron Sorrell was like a top 100 type of player. I liked him like a third round kind of grade on him. So I really like that pick. Just a rock solid, steady guy. Someone who could, if you had an injury to Kingsley Enagbare or someone like that, who could start games for you pretty early on. He's big enough, strong enough, explosive enough that he's not going to hurt you if he has to play reps early on, because he's a good run defender already. Super smart, super steady. Now, what I think is more interesting, frankly, and by the way, the Packers have been telling us this, is they did basically nothing in the secondary. And now we have reports that a reconciliation between Jaire Alexander and the Packers is being discussed. Can we put these things together? Are they telling us something about what the Packers believe their roster looks like? We'll talk about that next on Locked On Packers. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So stop just managing your money and start building wealth. It is the perfect tool to manage with your partner, making it smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. See, you're saving money already. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan you can be this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. The Packers did not take a corner until Micah Robinson in the 7th round. And within a week of the draft, in fact, less than a week, we get reporting from Rob Bukowski, which, let me just say, we talked about yesterday. Come out of the draft, no trades, no trade for Jalen Ramsey. There's other players out there available on the market. And it seemed to me, just like reading the tea leaves a little bit here, that even though I believe less than 50-50 that Jaire Alexander is going to be on this team, that it seemed more likely now than it had seemed at any time going back to like November. And anyone that says this has not been a weird situation is not paying attention. There was this weird rush to like, oh, well, he's hurt. No, it was weird. Okay, I'm telling you, it was weird even for people in the building. They're going, what's the deal? He'll practice and then doesn't play? Like, we'd just like to know what the situation is. That would be nice to prepare for. And that wasn't always possible. That was frustrating. Rob Bukowski reported about that frustration. And I said when that happened, that meant it's over. Once that leaks, it's over, that relationship. What's interesting is Rob Bukowski is the one reporting this now. Now, we don't know if it's same sourced or anything like that, but it is interesting to me that now we're getting the reconciliations being discussed. It could be on the table as both sides realize, look, there's not really much of a market here. You're not going to get the money you want. And so maybe we'll just make this work. Let's reduce this cap hit a little bit, reduce that base salary. Maybe if you want to cut off that next year, we'll do that. I think that makes sense for everybody. They certainly operated in this draft like they're comfortable with their cornerback rotation, whether that means Jaire Alexander's on the team or not. Whatever their plan is, they were comfortable enough to pass on corner at a number of opportunities, high early leverage moments when they were real. Like, there were a bunch of corners available to them in the first round. There were a bunch of corners available to them in the second round. And by the time you get to the third round, there's not going to be options that really move the needle for you. I think once you get into day 3, especially, it's like, well, this guy's not better than Carrington Valentine, so I'm not really going to worry about it. But you're going to need a Keyshawn Nixon replacement probably sooner than later. And you just don't have bodies past that. So what's the plan here? It seems like Micah Robinson is the plan. We'll see Kalen King. But what if not drafting a corner at all in this draft, which is the only way you can draft a player, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. Is that they believe Jaire Alexander, that this is reconcilable. And remember, we have never had any reports that Jaire Alexander wants to be out. So what if this is all just leverage by the Packers, that they just wanted him to take less money, or that they initially wanted to trade him? They didn't find the opportunities that they wanted, in part because it sounds like Jaire Alexander was not willing to take a pay cut. And now you've gotten to this point where it's past the draft. I don't think teams are going to be super interested in doing that. Teams feel good about where their teams are right now. If they needed a corner, they would have drafted one. That now you go, hey, look, this is a marriage of convenience then. And then you have a secondary with Nate Hobbs, Jaire Alexander, Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard, Carrington Valentine. Suddenly that is a pretty damn good group. You've got inside-outside flexibility of everybody after Jaire Alexander. And even if you wanted to, Jaire Alexander. I think if you told Ja, hey, look, when we play the Vikings, you are going to shadow Justin Jefferson, which means if he's in the slot, you're in the slot. He would go, bet. Hey, it's 3rd and 8. Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot. You got him. Now, I think they signed Nate Hobbs to give them that flexibility if and when Jaire Alexander is no longer on this team. But it certainly would frame the draft in a different way if we believed Jaire Alexander was going to stay on this team. And maybe if he ends up on the team, it will become clear to us in retrospect that by draft day, the Packers knew that. That's not something we can know, I don't think, right now, because there could still be some different kind of resolution here. But the fact that now reconciliation is even being floated. I mean, it doesn't even get floated unless there's like real chances, non-zero chances that reconciliation is possible. Because if you're the Packers, you don't want that out there. If you think this is going to go south, because the fan base is going to go, we want Jaire Alexander. The team is better with Jaire Alexander on it. Look, PR does not always drive what gets leaked and what doesn't, because there are, reporters have relationships with people, and sometimes the relationships with those people, the people are not privy to the high-level discussions going on. They're just saying, hey, look, this thing with Jaire, like, it's bad. And, you report that because, presumably it was true. They're telling us, though, regardless of what the future is with Jaire, that they feel comfortable with this group. Jaire or no. But whatever their plan is, they feel good about it. And that was true with the pass rush and the interior defensive line. Like, this defense, their first 3 picks were offense. So they obviously felt good about this defense. They feel good about Jeff Hafley. Now, whether or not that is the wise move moving forward, we'll see, because if Jeff Hafley is coaching somewhere else in 2026 because he's got a head coaching job, do you have a coach who can also maximize your defense the same way? Anthony Campanile, who was deemed the sort of DC in waiting here, the future DC on the staff, he got poached. So do you have a backup plan here? I think this is why Brian Gutekunst said at the combine, and I thought it was, a very astute comment about designated pass rushers, like, or changing to fit the scheme. Hey, your schemes can change. And they changed last year for the Packers. They wanted to be a 3-deep, 4-under team. They turned into a team that, they did play plenty of single high. They did play plenty of cover 3, but they had to play a lot more cover 2 than they wanted to. They had to play a lot less man coverage than I think they wanted to. And they had to blitz a lot more than they wanted to. Things change. If you tailor things too much to your scheme, or you bet too much on your coaching staff, especially a non-head coach coaching staff, too much on your scheme, that can be risky. That is risky, and it can be something that burns you. The Packers clearly believe in the infrastructure, but they also believe in the infrastructure of the roster, of the players already there. What does that mean for Jaire Alexander? We'll see. We'll see. All right, more to come this week on Locked On Packers. Follow me on all the social media platforms where you can. Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. Follow the podcast on all the platforms, all the ones I just mentioned, plus TikTok. Subscribe wherever you find podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube so you can stay Locked On Packers.